Okay, interesting. So definitely uh, good to see that a lot of the BI consumers out there do want to be able to do their own analysis and data discovery. Definitely, still a lot of them are finding a hard time to do so. So today's webinar will definitely spend a lot of time talking about different options to make it easier for those types of users. Good to see that there's a 35% of the users out there that are already doing it themselves. So definitely, that's where we want them to be. And still not very surprising, but still not a small percentage of users that are not even adopting the BI system to begin with, not even as consumers. So hopefully some of the techniques that we'll be talking about today will be helpful in helping users to get more adoptions and looking at their data often. Okay, so with that, we'll get started. Thank you everybody for joining. My name is Ariel Perulis. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at Dundas Data Visualization. And today we'll be talking about the actionable analytics and new options to make data work for different users. And especially I want to focus today on the BI consumers, how we can turn those consumers from being just consumers into actual producers of insights, how we can help those users use data in a more actionable way. And I think the challenge of making data actionable across the enterprise is often very much dependent on the ability of business users to get accurate data in real time. While self-serve data discovery tool has helped to shorten time to insight, it still requires some specific skills and depends on the accuracy of the data. What I'll do during this webinar is I really try to cover how Dundas BI is helping those traditional data consumers, not just the analysts, to enrich data and provide their human insights to drive better behaviors and fully control the analytics. So first things first, here's a very brief introduction to Dundas for those of you who are new to us. For 25 years, Dundas has been creating innovative products in the data visualizations and business intelligence space. Our product line has evolved substantially over the years, but our motto continues to be the same. We're making 80% of use cases easy to achieve and all the rest still possible. And I think that's very evident in our latest platform, Dundas BI, where common use cases and interactions are all available out of the box, yet our fully open API and deep customizations can be leveraged to extend and customize the end user experience without being confined to our application limitations, without having to use other solutions and tools outside of our environment. So as you can imagine, Dundas BI is an extremely flexible platform. It provides a tailored user experience which helps increase adoption rates by fitting more users' needs within the organizations. So for example, it allows different workflows where analysts can start exploring data, and no matter what type of data it is, could be relational data, could be data stored in OLAP structures like SQL Server Analysis OLAP cubes, could be data coming from big data analytical databases such as Redshift and Google BigQuery. Could be flat files, could be cloud services data, whatever source that may be. Those analysts can start exploring data directly from the source and quickly turn that into a shareable dashboard that they can distribute among other colleagues. On the other hand, BI professionals, they may want to start by preparing a data model and then build reports on top of it. So the flexibility of the platform allows you to build a really custom and managed solutions that works exactly the way you want to use it and not the way our tool dictates. So different workflows support different types of users' behaviors and needs. And the neat thing about it is that those workflows can really be shared across different users. So even if I'm an analyst creating a new exploration on the fly, whatever I've created, a data professional can come in, take and then promote and use across the entire enterprise for other business analysts to be able to use, or for a centralized report that other users will be consuming. So another way to look at it is that flexibility is really what's providing the ability to move much faster and meet different questions and requirements that comes up when we do our day-to-day work. Looking at the capabilities, you can see Dundas BI truly is an end-to-end BI platform with rich functionality covering all user types. So it's ranging from data preparation to analytics, of course, advanced presentations, tracking back to our roots in data visualization, and advanced collaboration as well. Some of it I'll be showing today. It's important to remember that everything is web-based, and from our point of view, that's extremely important to ensure that we have a not only consistent experience across different types of operating systems and devices, but also a very easy way to onboard and use a different solution that tool provides without being forced to install or use other environments that you may not have in your client desktop environment or your mobile devices. Now, our administration layer provides capability to easily deploy to the entire enterprise, including capabilities such as built-in multi-tenancy management and built-in version control. And again, these are things that are extremely important when you want to go to larger scale solutions that adapt and fit lots of users, not just a small group of users. And lastly, to highlight the total flexibility of the platform, Dundas BI is entirely open. So it provides APIs for the front end, APIs for the backend, and of course APIs for integration and embedding the entire application into other platform and solutions. Now, the advantage of Dundas BI is that it really combines the best of both the what we call the traditional IT-led application, those tools that requires a technical users to set up the environment and also develop and author content in it, together with modern data discovery tools designed more for business users to have the ability to do their own analysis, obviously doing that by providing ease of use and kind of greater focus on simpler workflows. So for example, what Dundas BI does, it provides in a single platform both the ability to run complex data preparation processes and use smart interactive visualizations to analyze it. And it's all done with the ease of use that you would expect by a modern application. Now, Dundas BI offers this combination that typically requires multiple tools along with immense flexibility and auto-adaptive user experience. And that's kind of the big differentiator that Dundas BI brings into the table, being able to do that in a single platform rather having to use multiple solutions to be able to meet your different requirements and the user experience you want to deliver to the rest of the organization. Okay, so now what I'd like to do is dive deeper into today's topic, actionable analytics. You may have seen this DIKA or DIKW if you replace the action with wisdom pyramid before. And I think it's important to start here as a reminder, is often people confuse the terms data, information, and knowledge, and what it really takes to get to an action. So while this pyramid does a good job to help and explain the different stages of data, I do want to take a simple example and make sure we are all on the same page. So the first stage, data, this is typically how data looks like when it's collected. A table or a certain structure stored somewhere, even if the data is semi-structured or non-structured at all, it lives somewhere. In this case, this is an example of a flights information, different fares, different dates for those flights, different airlines. And I can see that summarized in what could easily be a table in some kind of a relational database somewhere. Now, let's take this data and look at when it's summarized and organized and displayed to a user in a meaningful way, what we typically refer to as information. Most organizations have it available down to at least this point. So this is an example of the user accessing for Air Canada website and selecting flights departing from Toronto to Dallas. He can see the data summarized by different days, by the departure time, the flight details. So an easier way to consume and that information. Now, the next level up, moving that information to knowledge, that is what they often really demands the ability to analyze the data. So the question is then how easy it is to analyze the data. And for example, in this case, what you can see here, without even using any interactions, is first of all, the ability to see the data against the right benchmark. So for example, in this website, I'm actually able to see the flights from Toronto to Dallas, not just for one airline, not just for Air Canada, like in my previous example, but actually compared across different airlines. So I can also see the Delta flights and other companies' flights, and really I have the right benchmark to understand which one of the flights I want to choose. On the left-hand side, highlighted in that rectangle, you can see different parameters I can use to further analyze the data. I can, for example, filter my information on the number of stops I want to have, or on the departure time or arrival time, or different types of variables I can use to really analyze the data and make sure it works the way I want it to make a better decision. And finally, to get to action, if we can get recommendations for the action, it's even better to incentivize us in making that decision, taking that action. So here I can see on the top left-hand side of this website, I can see that they've used different algorithms that are analyzing data and are advising me to buy a specific flight today. That's really kind of giving me the incentive to take the action right now. Because of that, the additional analysis of the data that is done automatically for me, I'm now able to get a recommendation and make that decision without even have to think about it so much or spend too much time analyzing and gathering knowledge, but actually getting that the action provided as a recommendation to me directly. So hopefully it's clear now. Our goal when using BI analytics is to climb the data, information, and knowledge pyramid as fast as possible in order to make a better decision, and if needed, take action. Sometimes the decision is to take no action, and that's fine as well, as long as we know that that was the right decision to make. Now, good BI analytics can help us climb this pyramid better and faster, as it allows us to go through those steps of collecting, organizing, summarizing, analyzing, and synthesizing the data to make that decision. Now, unfortunately, most firms are not at the point yet where they got the knowledge required to take the right action. A Forrester recent study shows that while 74% of firms wants to use actionable analytics, or in other words, be data-driven, only 29% of those firms are successful at doing that. So the reality is that most firms do have the processes and systems in place to collect and organize and summarize the data. Most also have the tools to be able to analyze it, but there is still a gap between the ability to put those tools to use and really analyze data and truly take action. And I think that's pretty much consistent with what we saw in the survey I started this webinar with, where you said that only 35% of your consumers are really doing their own data discovery and being able to do their own analytics and be data driven, and a slightly higher percentage than what we see from the Forrester study, but again, pretty low percentage comparing to what we would expect and want to have in the business. So what makes BI analytics truly actionable? Here are the 4 key elements we often see required when thinking about how to make BI analytics actionable. We want to have trust in your data. We want to make sure we have context where possible, timing that works for the business, and have that integrated into where the business needs it. So there are other elements, of course, that can and will impact how actionable an insight is, but we feel that if you have these 4, you should be on the right path to action. So let's dive deeper into each one of those. The first one, trust in your data. Trust in your data is really crucial to ensure that people are actioned by it. We all know about the garbage in, garbage out syndrome, and I think the first users to notice it are the business people because they know their data best. And if the data doesn't make sense, it will simply be ignored. A recent study by Gartner shows that poor data quality costs organizations $9.7 million per year. So the solution, of course, is to take the measures required to improve data quality, but often those measures are involving complex processes that are taking a long time, usually requires IT's involvement, and they are typically never ending. There's always the need to further improve your data quality. So while we should take those measures to try and improve our data quality on the long term, we should also consider other ways in the short term to ensure everybody's working off the right numbers. So let me take you to Dundas BI and show you a quick example of what I mean by being able to apply those data corrections or data quality improvements on the short term. Okay, so you should be able to see now a very simple dashboard we've created in Dundas BI. This is the Dundas BI interface. As I mentioned, it's all web-based. It's all accessible from your browser. So I'm just using a browser here. I have a tab open on a sales funnel dashboard. This is the standard interface of Dundas BI with our menu on the left-hand side and the toolbar for a dashboard. I'm just going to go into full screen mode so you can see this dashboard slightly better. And what you can see on this dashboard is a breakdown of the funnel by the different funnel steps. So imagine a sales organization that define different stages in the selling process: prospecting, qualifying, doing some needs analysis with the prospect, proposing the solution, identifying the right decision makers, doing some perception analysis, proposing, and finally negotiating and hopefully winning the deal. Now, across those different stages, I can see the breakdown for my different sales reps. So I can see each sales rep and the value of a deal that he potentially has under that specific step in the funnel. So for example, if I look at my very first sales rep and I look on the prospecting step, I can see that sales rep has a total funnel under that step of $341,049 for that specific step. So that's an aggregate results of different deals and prospects they have under that specific stage of the funnel. And at the bottom, I can also see my total funnel showing the aggregate results across all my different sales rep against my target. And you can see right now, I have that nice smiley face showing me that I'm meeting my target. I'm basically exceeding the quota I've defined for the different sales rep to be able to be on the growth path that I'm looking to have for my organization. Now, this is a very common type of a view that many sales directors will be using in their organizations to kind of keep track of the different sales rep. If your organization is like most other organizations, there's typically would be having meetings with the different sales rep, reviewing the funnels, making sure it's in a healthy state, and then taking that maybe into a management meeting and kind of reviewing and sharing that result with the rest of the management team. So for example, here, I may have a process where I'm having one-on-ones with my different sales rep, and I can see that Lindsay Hudson, for example, has a pretty weak funnel. There's only one stage in that funnel that's actually heavy in value. So that's the fifth stage, and that's worth almost $450,000 for that step. But let's say I'm just about to head into my executive meetings, and I heard from Lindsay. She's on the road. She just came back from she's just flying back to the office, and she left me a note just before she onboarded to take her flight that the meeting with a prospect didn't go very well, and that prospect decided to put the entire project on hold, and that project was actually worth $400,000 US dollars in net worth. So what I can do that when I go into my meeting, instead of reflecting that view that is incorrect or having to go into the CRM system to manipulate the data for Lindsay, which I may not be allowed to do or may not know how to do exactly because that's her processes, what I can do is I can quickly right-click this data point here and maybe provide a note and say, well, you know what? At the top here, I'm just going to type here, this is a probably lower, should be around 50,000. So I can apply that note and have that available on the view. All the other users that are accessing and viewing that report will be able to see that note with my explanation of what's happening here. That being said, it's still not reflecting the right numbers. So if I look at the bottom, I still have a healthy funnel. I still have that green smiley face. And if I go into my meeting and someone is not paying attention to that note that I have on this dashboard here, they may think that everything is working as expected. Maybe remove this note and show you maybe a different way you can take to now provide better insights to the other users. So what I can do is I can, instead of providing a note, I can open that data point context menu again and use what we call the correct value action. And when I click on that, I have a similar interface to the one that you saw before. I can provide a new value, and I can say, well, this is because the Dragonwell prospect is putting the project on hold. And now when I apply that, you can see that not only I have a comment explaining what happened here, and also providing me what was the original value, which is very important because sometimes I may make corrections to the data, but that's not may mean necessarily that is the actual exact accurate value. So I may still want to be able to see what was the original value I came from. So that is the original value that's stored in my CRM system, but I've corrected it to 50,000. You can see exactly when I did that. But more importantly, you can see that impact of that correction on other data points I have on this visual. So you can see now on the dashboard, I now have that not so happy smiley face, and I'm not meeting my overall target. So a very quick and simple way, but still allowing non-technical users, BI consumers, to now make sure that everybody's aligned and everybody's consuming the right data and working off the right information to take the right action. In this case, probably the action is needs to be finding other ways to supplement and ensure our funnel increases, and that could be other activities that we may be taking. But at least now I know that everybody knows what's our projection, what's our expected the funnel to be in at the end of the period. Okay, let's move on to the next point, and that is a context. Now, I think in terms of visualizations and BI, of course, content is extremely important. Content is often the king in the sense of if you don't have the right indicators, the right metrics, your entire visual will be pretty useless. But at the same time, I would definitely argue that context on top of that is kind of the new king. It is really hard to move forward on an insight if you're lacking the background to appreciate why it's important. And this is something we teach all the time in our data visualization best practice courses. It's one of the first things to check on your visuals. What we do is we explain the importance of designing your visuals with the right comparison points to give it context. And yet, even though we explain that over and over again, we often see visuals created without any context. And I think lacking the right context can either lead to the wrong action, as someone may assume that the situation is good or bad without really understanding it, or in other cases, it can lead to no action at all and just raise more questions, such as is the number I'm seeing on this indicator a good number or a bad number? For example, is the number of product orders I had this month a good number? Is 125 orders a good number? I'm not sure. And then I start asking other questions. What was it last month? And so on and so on. So I think part of the reasons we often lack context is because the person designing the visuals and creating the initial indicators is not always the same person as the one setting the goals for those. Or because the goals are changing quite often, it makes it harder to maintain, especially if those goals are tracked in a kind of a centralized IT managed system. And that's, again, another process that may involve multiple people to set those goals. So what I want to do now is I want to go back to Dundas BI and show you how we see our users adding that context into the different visuals they have in their environment. So I'll go back to my Dundas BI environment here. I'm going to exit the full screen mode, and I'm going to open an existing metric that I have defined here. In this case, it's a similar metric. Instead of showing the sales funnel broken down by different sales stages, I'm showing the aggregate value of the sales funnel by the different sales rep. What you can see here right now is this bar chart is sorted by the alphabetical order of the different sales reps' name. Oftentimes, to be able to compare them and start providing benchmarks to myself, what I want to do is just simply sort this data. So I'm just going to right-click, choose the sort option, sort by the funnel instead of the sales rep, and define it to have a descending sort order. So now I can see who's my sales rep with the highest, biggest funnel, and who's the one with the smallest funnel. So that's the first point that I will typically do, and that will give me some kind of a context in terms of being able to compare each sales rep to the other sales rep. That being said, that may not be the right comparison to do because different sales reps may have different attributes to themselves. So some have more experience, some are focused on different verticals, some work in different geographies that they are more or bigger markets that are holding bigger portfolios options. So I really need to be able to provide a context in the different individual sales rep perspective. And the way we often do that is by providing targets. Now, if I go in and add a contextual measure here, so simply click on this button here to add a contextual measure and say, well, let's say my target quota per sales rep is 1 million. If I apply that, you can see that same value created across all the different sales rep. I can maybe change that contextual measure and give it a name. I'll call it quota. And now, again, I can see that visual and giving me that indication against the funnel. And I can see a lot of reps are exceeding the quota, some are not. But again, it's the same target across all of them. And that's something I can typically do in many different BI tools. What I cannot do often is the ability to really control that individually for each one of the sales rep. Excuse me. So for example, what I can do now to be able to control that is simply click again on that contextual quota that I just added and open this multiple button on the right hand side. So if I click on that, this will now allow me to very easily type in the value I want to specify for each one of the sales reps. So for example, for Gabriela, it could be that she's a very new sales rep and she only joined a couple of months ago. I don't expect her to have the same quota as other sales reps. So what I can do for her is I can, for example, specify a quota of 500,000. And you can see it's an immediate feedback. As I click on the new value, as I enter it in, it automatically updates in my visual. And I can do the same for other sales reps. I can, for example, say, well, Lindsay had a smaller market she's working on, so her quota is 250,000, and maybe the last rep has a 100,000 sales quota. So what you can see here is a very quick way for me to now contextualize information individually for each one of the data points I have in my visual or in my dashboard, without having to go back to IT, without having to have a centralized process to collect a target. I can simply do it directly in my BI analytics system, simply by entering in those values. At this point, it's very easy now for me to further contextualize this, maybe even add some visual cues to help me understand how well the different sales reps are performing against that quota, simply by setting up some states. And I can say, this is going to be my funnel state, and I'm going to have a bad state here. If one of my reps is having a funnel which is smaller than the quota I just defined. And now if I click on this visual button, you can see a very quick indication, okay, Shanna is the sales rep that right now I need to work with to improve her processes to make sure that she's meeting the funnel I've specified for her. So a very quick way as a consumer, without depending on other users, be able to contextualize my data and really apply the business knowledge and the wisdom I have, or the human insight I have, directly into my system and analyze my data in that right context. Okay, moving on to the third point, timing. I think timing is a pretty obvious one, similar to how yesterday news feels very stale. Finding an insight that should have led to an action a few days later could easily mean that the action is not going to be relevant anymore. So let's take a look at another example to see how we can shorten the time to insight and from there take an action. So one more time, I'm going to go into a Dundas BI. And what I'm going to do here, I'm actually going to create a new exploration or a new process where I'm going to analyze my data. Now, many other BI systems would require establishing a connection to a data source first. And beyond the connection, they will also require to predefine some kind of a data model ahead of time to be able to analyze this data. In many cases, what the data model will require is some kind of a push of that data model into an in-memory engine or into another storage type that is predefined, and only then users can come in and do their own data discovery. What we try to do in Dundas BI is really change that process in the sense of allowing users to work on top of data sources that contains the information they need to analyze directly on the fly, and then from there define different data models that can be reused and applied to other use cases and other users. So for example, a very common analysis that users may want to do is on top of simple Excel spreadsheet. So here I have my order quantity by product, again, following the same data I was using in different examples. And that's available to me in an Excel spreadsheet. Instead of having to go in and configure and define a connection to that file, I can just go in and drag and drop that file onto my system, onto my browser. And once I do that, I can immediately see the data and I can start analyzing it. So I can see the different months, the different products I'm selling, and the order quantity for each one of those months. And now I can simply move around the different items between the different rows of my table into the columns of this table. And Dundas BI will automatically find the best way to visualize and explain this data for me. So in this case, what Dundas BI identified is a very clear pattern, and that's why it chose to visualize this data for me in a line chart, providing me the different trends I see for my current product sales and my next generation product sales. So imagine I'm an organization that used to have one product line. And then in April of 2016, I've started introducing a new product line, what we call a next-gen product. So up until the introduction of that new product, I had a very good growth on the current product I used to sell. And every month I was selling more and more of that product. As soon as I've introduced that new product to the market, the next-gen product to the market, I've added a lot of uncertainty among my buyers, and that immediately created a big drop in my forecast or in my actual results of the orders for my current product. You can see that immediately happening the following month. And since then, what I can see is a steady decline in my sales of my orders of my current product, and a steady increase in my next-gen product sales. So that's great. I can easily get there without having to think about how to connect to my data, without having to think about how to display the data. But now how can I further analyze it? For example, one of the things I can see here is I'm missing the values for the latest month for my next-gen product. So one of the things I can do here is I can specify, for example, if I'm missing values, missing data points, let's say treat them in a certain way. Let's maybe specify that missing data points should be the average of the different data points I have across my my visual. I can maybe do a rolling average or average without the missing data points. Or I can simply say, you know what, if it's missing, really what it means is it was a value of 0. So if I specify that, you can now see my next-gen product is now supplementing the last missing data point that I had before there with a new value, which is a value of 0. But of course, I know that's not the real value I had in terms of number of orders for that product. What I can do now is actually go in here and specify what the real value was. So I can use that correction value that I showed earlier and the ability to trust my data again here as well. And I can say, well, you know what? The value was actually 11,000. Apply that, and I can immediately see the trend changes and actually continuing that nice growth that I had on the next-gen product sales or orders. And I can, of course, focus maybe on a specific product line. Let's say I want to focus just on analysis for my next-gen product, so simply apply a filter, have the chart focusing just on the next generation product, and maybe even use some analytics that the system provides to me to be able to better understand how my orders are going to look like going forward. So I can maybe go into my visualization menu and specify to add a trend line into this chart. So once I click that, you can see a trend line showing the projection of those sales into the of that product orders into the next few months. And as I keep on changing this value, you can see the calculations changing accordingly. So I can change that value and maybe say, well, you know what? I actually didn't say 11,000. I had orders of 15,000 for that month. And once I do that, you can see my forecast updating accordingly. So I'm almost using it kind of as a what-if analysis scenario, simply by being able to tweak that data value that I have in my system. And again, I don't have to share that with other users. I can keep it private to myself, but just as an exercise for me to see what's going to happen based on derived calculations I have from the data if I were to change different data points. And I don't need to be a very complex, process or something that requires technical skills. I can just come in here, point on the right data point, change the value, and see how it affects the results going forward. Okay, moving on to the last point, the integration points. And I think this is a key point. In order to be relevant, an insight needs to be delivered to the right person at the right time in the right setting. The same attributes that drive higher user adoptions to any system are true to driving action out of the usage of a BI analytics system. So specifically, making sure users don't need to go out of the way to access the system output. whether that means scheduled emails or alerts to push information to the users, or maybe embedding the system into other applications so they can access the insight in their workflows in the right moment, or making it easy to consume it on mobile devices. So wherever they are, whenever they need to, they can always see the information. We need to make it pervasive so it's easy to get traction and have the system adopted. One of the barriers for that in the past was data connectivity. And I think that's becoming less of an issue for many tools because they offer many different data connections out of the box, especially the modern tools. Yeah, it's not hard to connect and view and read data from different sources. On the other hand, capturing new data processes defined by the business, that's still a bit more of a time-consuming effort. For example, if your team decides to launch a new sales campaign, and that sales campaign data doesn't really fit into an existing CRM configuration that you have, how would you go about tracking that data? Most organizations will start by capturing it using a spreadsheet or maybe a SharePoint list or some kind of a data file that's kept on a shared drive or something similar. Now, in most cases, the problem with that is that it will cause another data silo in your organization, which is what we're trying to avoid. So let's go back in Dundas BI and show you how we can enable that a solution for this type of scenario. So I'm going to go back into Dundas BI, and I'm going to switch here into another dashboard. And again, let me open that in the full screen mode. And what you can see here, this is a task list dashboard that we've created. So the difference between this and any other dashboard that you would typically see in many other BI systems, that this dashboard is not just designed to visualize information, in this case, the different tasks that I have in my organization called Dragonwell. I'm actually able to collect information directly from my dashboard. And that's very powerful because that means that in the same environment where I'm analyzing my data, I'm actually able to do small data collection of different processes without being forced to do that in a different environment. So I'm integrating my entire workflow into one system. So here, for example, I can specify, let's say for a specific team, let's say my research team, I have a new task and I want to investigate the option to integrate into a Dragon, let's say Dragonfire. Let's say that's a different system I have within my organization called a Dragonwell. I'm going to specify an owner for this task. I'm going to say the owner is Holly, and the due date for this task, and that can be maybe a couple of days from today. The priority, I'll set to a priority number 2. The status, so right now it's in progress. The completion percentage is 0 because I just entered it. Specify the different team members that will be taking part of that activity. So that can be maybe Brian, could be maybe John, could be Linda. And then I can specify specific notes about this task. What should I consider? Check the open API and ability to customize. So I can specify different comments or descriptions. And once I submit that, you can see that task immediately added to my visual. So I'm not forced to go into a different system or a different application to enter that data into my system. And the way I've set up that process of what we call data input, of collecting that information in Dundas BI, is actually quite simple. I didn't need to use necessarily a very advanced developer to create that data input process. Quite simply, it can also be done in a similar fashion that users will be doing it in Excel, just typing in directly the value into the different cells of the table or data input the interface that they want to provide, and making it very, very easy to now centralize and integrate that data process as well into my BI analytics system. So really what it means that if insights are not routed to the right decision makers, they will not receive the attention they deserve. And if insights are not timely, they might be too stale for stakeholders to act on. And if insights are really trapped in a different environment or in an analytical tool that is not embedded into your business application, that will mean that users may never access that or get it in the right device they need it as frequently as they need it. So the insight may never reach the intended audience. And there's actually another option here available for me to make sure those tasks are available and tracked by different users. So for example, I can see in my visual here that I'm highlighting the countdown. So if I'm entering a negative countdown in terms of when I was supposed to complete the task, what was my due date, or maybe along the priority, or if I'm the owner of that task, I can actually set up notifications for myself. I can do what we call data-driven notifications and add a condition. And I can say, well, if the value enters a certain state, if the value is in the state of a negative countdown of days past my due date, and it's assigned to me and has a priority which is a 1 or 2, then I want to be notified about that event and get it via email, for example, to quickly take an action on top of that. So I can make that a bit more pervasive, a bit more linked to the different users just by targeting them with those data-driven notifications that I can set up in the environment. So both the ability to collect information and then assign that to different users and trigger an action. These are very powerful tools to make sure the insights are integrated into the workflows of different business users. So to summarize, you can make sure your BI analytics is actionable by implementing trust, context, the right timing, and integration into your existing environment. And as you saw, it doesn't have to require a specialized analyst. The power to do so can really be at the consumer level, seeking for those insights to take the right action. So at this point, what I would like to do is maybe take a few questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to type in those questions into the GoToWebinar's question panel, and I'll try to address those as much as possible in the remaining time that we have. Okay, so there's one question here, which is just a kind of a housekeeping item that I probably should have mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, but will this presentation be available for online viewing afterwards? And absolutely, like any other webinar that we have, it's all going to be available. The recorded version of this presentation will be available on our website following this webinar. We're also going to email you with the link if you register to the webinar, so you should get an email from us in a couple of days with the link to this webinar. Okay, so there's a question here, and that's around the, I guess, the real-time concept I was talking about and the timing. So can Dundas BI do live lookups to system of records, or does data have to be duplicated in Dundas? And I've kind of alluded to that in a couple of different slides, both in my first slide describing Dundas BI and the ability to have different workflows for analysts, for consumers, for developers. And I also talked about it a little bit when I showed the timing example in terms of how I was able to connect to data from Excel just by dragging and dropping that directly to the system. So Dundas BI by default is designed to go back directly and do live queries against your system of records. No matter what data source it is, by default, Dundas BI will go and try and retrieve data from the source on the fly when it's being queried. That being said, so it's not duplicating the data in the Dundas BI application by default. That being said, if you do have complex processes of data that they would require quite a lot of data preparation and transformation, that will mean a lot of time or more time than what the user would expect when the dashboard needs to load. Let's say the data preparation process takes more than 10 seconds, which is going to kind of hurt the experience for the user when he brings up a view or a dashboard and wants to see the results. What you can do is you can set up that data model, that data preparation process you've defined in Dundas BI to be stored upfront in the Dundas BI in-memory engine or in the Dundas BI warehouse database. So we offer two different options to store the information up front. It's not necessarily duplication of your system record. It could just be a process results on top of your system records stored in our engine memory or in our warehouse. and then from there serve the users to a different serve the users with the different data points instead of going back to your records system of records, which obviously will typically be much faster. So that's a choice you can make when you design and create different views and dashboards. So there's a question here about the task list that I was demonstrating for the ability to integrate the processes. The Dragon Well task list I've created, and is there documentation available and explanation on how to set up that that type of web form? The answer is absolutely. On the Dundas support site, there's different types of articles explaining how to use what we call data input. You'll see examples on how to set up data input at the data preparation layer. So basically defining a structure for a data model you want to capture. Then you'll see documentation on how to create interactions on a dashboard to collect the data. So for example, how you can create a filter control that will provide different options that will go back into the task list when you click on the submit button. A simple search on our support site for data input will reveal those different articles and show you how to set up that type of a form for your users. Okay, there's a question here around the Dundas BI integration with a Avaya software. So from the top of my head, I'm not sure exactly which data source Avaya software is using in terms of a database to store the information. But if I recall correctly, it's a pretty standard relational database. I may be wrong here, but even if it's not a relational database, you can easily connect to out of the box. Even, for example, if Avaya provides an API to be able to query the data that's available in Avaya, Dundas BI can definitely integrate with that data. Dundas BI offers a very long list of data connectors out of the box, but at the same time, it also offers open APIs to extend that list. So that means that you can basically interface and create a new data connection to any other data source that provides connections to it via its own API. So definitely that type of integration is possible. Okay, a couple more questions here, but I will get back to those questions afterwards via email. And if there's any additional questions, what I would encourage you to do is definitely reach out to our team. If you go to a website, you definitely can see the option there to submit questions. You can, if you want to have a specific product walkthrough, if you're new to Dundas BI, if you want to get a demo, that's definitely something you can request on the website, and we can schedule a demo that is going to be tailored to your specific environment, to your specific questions. What you can also do if you want to try it yourself, if you're new to Dundas, you can definitely download the application or use an online trial and just get a quick feel for the user experience when you want to analyze data on top of a Excel or something similar. If you are an existing user of Dundas BI and you're not using those techniques today, we definitely encourage you to take a look into how you can introduce the option to do data correction, contextualize the data, or things such as the data input into your organization and make sure business users are taking advantage of that. So I want to thank you all for the time today. Hopefully that the presentation was meaningful and helpful, and will help you find new ways to drive more actionable insights within your organization. Thank you very much and have a good day. Bye-bye.